All right, let's dive deep, shall we? We're taking a look at the Meditations of a Christian Saint. It's by Agiman Bonsu.
Yeah, the title might sound a little, intimidating.
Intense.
Yeah, intense. But I think you'll find that Bonsu's introduction is anything but. It's really thought-provoking.
It's not your typical you're going to hell kind of thing.
Not at all. Right away, he kind of challenges those traditional ideas of what a saint even is. We often picture like stained glass figures, historical figures, but Bonsu is saying, look, living saints are all around us right now.
Okay, hold on. So we're not talking about people who have been, officially canonized by the church.
No, not necessarily. Bonsu argues that sainthood isn't really about official recognition, it's more about a way of life. He even ties it to these two laws of life, survival and love.
Two laws of life, so like the 10 Commandments of being a saint.
Well, he suggests that they represent God or life itself. So survival, that's about recognizing our need for safety and security. We all need that.
Makes sense.
But then there's love, which pushes us to connect with others and contribute to something bigger than ourselves.
So it's like this constant tension, right? Between our own needs and the needs of others.
Exactly. And Bonsu is saying that living saints, they're the people who can navigate that tension. They understand we need to survive, but they still strive to live a life of service and compassion.
No, it's like we're all walking this tightrope.
Yeah, great analogy. And it seems like Bonsu is saying sainthood isn't about perfection. It's more about, striving for that balance, even when we stumble.
Now, the book is called Meditations of a Christian Saint. Does that mean this whole living saint idea is just for Christians?
Well, that's where it gets interesting. Bonsu draws inspiration from his faith, of course, but he's actually presenting a more universal concept here.
Okay, so anyone, no matter what they believe, could be a living saint.
Precisely. He's not saying you have to follow any particular dogma or anything. It's about recognizing the potential for goodness and virtue that's in all of us.
All right, that makes sense. But how does he actually define those qualities? What makes someone a living saint in Bonsu's view?
Well, he dives into the specifics later in the book, but in the intro, he touches on things like being a moral example, selflessness, and a commitment to serving others.
He doesn't sugarcoat it, though, does he? Being a saint sounds pretty tough.
You're right. He acknowledges the challenges, talks about our human weaknesses, all of the things that can make it difficult to stay on that tightrope we were talking about.
So it's not about denying our flaws, it's more about acknowledging them and trying to be better.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. True strength comes from confronting our weaknesses, not pretending they don't exist.
Okay, there's one more thing for this intro that really caught my attention. This whole idea of the Council of Living Saints.
Ah, yes. Bonsu definitely piques our curiosity there.
He doesn't reveal a whole lot, though.
Right. He drops these little hints, leading us deeper into this world he's creating.
So what do we know?
Well, he describes it as a group of people from all sorts of different backgrounds, but they all embody these saintly ideals and work together to make a positive impact on the world.
And they have this strong sense of patriotism, right? Which seems a little odd considering he emphasizes, global unity.
It does seem a little contradictory, but the way Bonsu explains it, a saint's patriotism isn't about, blind allegiance to one country. It's more about understanding that every part of this planet, every corner, is blessed with what's needed for life and godliness.
So it's about appreciating your homeland while also recognizing we're all part of this global family.
Exactly. And that actually connects to a fascinating point he makes about resources. The council believes that every place on earth has what's needed for life, growth, and even godliness.
So he's challenging that scarcity mindset that often leads to conflict and inequality. Like, we already have everything we need, we just have to learn how to share it.
I think that's one of the key takeaways from this introduction. He's suggesting a new way of being in the world, one that considers both our individual needs and the needs of everyone.
Okay, so we've covered living saints, two laws of life, qualities of a saint, the challenges we all face, and this mysterious council. That's a lot for just an introduction.
It is, but it lays the groundwork for everything else he's going to explore.
So where do we go from here?
Well, from here, Bonsu delves deeper into each of these concepts, giving us insights, meditations, and even practical advice, how we can try to live a more saintly life.
Okay, I'm definitely ready to dive deeper. But before we do, what were your initial thoughts on the intro? What stood out to you the most?
What really struck me was that emphasis on how every place on earth has what's needed for life, growth, and godliness. Does that make us question if we're using our resources in a way that benefits everyone? And are we acknowledging the potential for sainthood, not just in ourselves, but in the people around us?
Those are some really great questions to think about as we move into the rest of the book. Let's take a quick break and then come back to explore those ideas a little further.
When we were talking about how Bonsu says sainthood isn't some far-off ideal, that really resonated with me. It's about the potential for good in ourselves and everyone around us. It's right here, right now.
Yeah, it's empowering. We don't have to wait for some, miracle or recognition to start living a better life.
Exactly. And it's not just like this vague, be good thing. He actually lays out what defines a living saint, at least, from his point of view.
All right, I'm listening. So what are those defining things?
Well, first he talks about moral exemplarship, being a role model, embodying good behavior and integrity.
So it's not enough to just believe it. You have to actually, live it out.
Exactly. He's big on walking the walk. He also talks about selflessness as a key part of being a living saint.
Selflessness, huh? That can be tough these days.
Yeah, you're not wrong. But Bonsu thinks real fulfillment comes from helping others, not just focusing on yourself.
Like that saying, it's better to give than to receive.
Right. And he takes it even further. He says those acts of service and compassion, they're not just good for others. They actually benefit us too.
Win-win, huh?
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be some big thing either. Even small acts can make a difference.
You know what? I'm starting to see how this living saints thing, it's less about religion and more about just living a good life, a life with meaning.
Yeah, you're getting it. And he's real about it too. It's not always easy. He talks about the struggles we face.
He doesn't sugarcoat anything.
Nope. He talks about our vulnerabilities, the things that make it hard to always choose, the good path.
So how do we do it then? How do we stay on track with this whole living saint thing?
Well, he gives some practical advice. He talks about knowing yourself, your weaknesses, things that might, trip you up.
Like know thy enemy.
Right. Then you can figure out how to manage them. He also talks about the importance of education.
Education? Like going back to school?
Not necessarily. He means continuous learning, seeking knowledge from different places. And he talks about emotional intelligence too.
That's a big one these days. What's that got to do with being saintly?
Well, it's about understanding your own emotions and other people's, developing empathy and compassion, being able to handle those tough social situations with grace.
So being smart isn't enough. You got to have emotional smarts too.
Exactly. And Bonsu believes we can develop these qualities through practice, reflecting on ourselves. And then he talks about resilience too.
Resilience. That seems pretty important, right? When things get tough.
It is. He means having the strength to come back from hard times, sticking to your values even when it's hard.
Like mental armor, right? To protect yourself.
Yeah. And he gives tips for that too. Practicing mindfulness, surrounding yourself with good people, finding ways to handle stress.
It's interesting, right? He mixes these spiritual ideas with really practical advice. It's like a roadmap for personal growth.
Yeah, and that's what's so good about his writing. He's not just talking about ideas, he's giving you tools to actually use them.
Okay, you convinced me. But there's still one thing bugging me. This Council of Living Saints. He keeps mentioning them, but doesn't tell us much.
Yeah, he leaves us hanging, doesn't he? But there are some clues about what they do.
Give me the good stuff. What are the clues?
Well, he says the council is like this visionary society. They embody what it means to be a saint. They're all about selflessness, love, service, but also, remember, patriotism, which is different in Bonsu's view.
Right, it's not about just one country. It's about being connected to everyone in every place.
Exactly, and he hints that they fight against what he calls devils, forces that threaten people and the planet.
Okay, now we're talking devils. Like the ones with horns and tails.
Well, he doesn't say exactly what they are in the intro, but he says they can be a lot of things. Enemies, challenges, anything that holds society back and pulls us away from, goodness.
So it's more like the dark side that we all face.
Yeah, I think so. And he says the council, they stand up to those forces. They're all about protecting life.
It's like a call to action, for good people to fight against evil.
Exactly. And he's definitely serious about it. He's not just sharing thoughts. He's talking about making the world better and wants us to join him.
So we've got this mix of spiritual stuff, practical advice, and this mystery council. A lot to think about. What's the main thing you get from all this?
I think Bonsu is saying that being a saint, it's not impossible. It's something we can all try to do, a way to live. And it's not about being perfect. It's about being aware of your flaws, facing challenges, and always trying to be better.
And seeing the potential for good in other people, too.
Absolutely. It's about having a wider view of the world, one that includes everyone and understands that we're all connected.
That's well said. I'm ready to keep going with this book. But what about you? What really stands out to you from what we've talked about so far?
I'm really struck by how Bonsu changes what we think about patriotism. It's not blind loyalty to a country. It's about recognizing we're all part of one big family. It makes you wonder, How can we be citizens of the world while still respecting where we come from?
Yeah, good point. It's about finding that balance, isn't it? Between our own identity and the fact that we're all human.
Exactly. And that seems to be a big idea for Bonsu. Finding that balance between ourselves and everyone else, between what we need and what others need, between the good and bad that's inside all of us.
Well said. That's something for all of you listening to think about as we continue looking at the meditations of a Christian saint. What do you think? How does this resonate with you? Going through Bonsu's ideas, there's this urgency I keep picking up on. He's not just saying think differently. He's like, do something.
Oh, totally. You can feel that purpose in everything he writes. Almost like, hey, we need living saints now more than ever.
Yeah, and it's not just about being good quietly. It's about getting out there and making things happen, being a force for good in all this darkness.
Right. He's basically saying being a saint doesn't mean hiding from the world. It means jumping right into the mess.
And he's honest about how messy it is, isn't it? He talks about those devils we face, things that threaten us and the whole planet. It's like a spiritual battle or something.
That's a strong image, and I think he's saying those devils aren't always out there somewhere else. A lot of times they come from us, our own selfishness, greed, just not caring.
So the fight starts on the inside.
Exactly. He makes it clear that beating those inner devils is just as important as facing the stuff out in the world.
And that ties back to knowing yourself, being resilient, all those things he talked about in the intro. He's giving us the weapons for this fight, right? Both inside and out.
Right, exactly. He's not just explaining the problems, he's showing us how to actually deal with them.
One thing that really hits me is he's not pretending to have all the answers. There's no strict rules. It's more like he's, a guide on this journey we're all on, discovering ourselves, becoming better.
Yeah, he's humble about it. He's not talking down to us. He's sharing his own experiences, and we get to see how they fit into our lives.
And he does it in a way that's fun to read. He uses strong words, gives examples we can relate to, even a little humor sometimes.
He's not afraid to get personal, talk about his own struggles and successes, makes him seem more, real, and that just makes his message hit harder.
So wrapping up our dive into this intro, what's the big thing you want listeners to take away?
For me, it's this. Being a saint isn't about being perfect, it's about trying. It's about seeing the good in ourselves and other people and then working to grow that good.
Yeah.
In our own lives and for everyone.
That's a great way to put it. And Bonsu's introduction is a really powerful guide for that journey. It takes courage, compassion, and facing those tough parts of ourselves and the world.
But the rewards are huge, not just for us personally, but for all of humanity.
Really powerful stuff. And on that note, we'll leave you to explore the meditations of a Christian saint further. Hope this deep dive got you curious, got you thinking about what it means to live a more saintly life, however you define that. Remember, it starts within each of us, but what we do can make a difference far beyond ourselves. So go out there and be the change you want to see.